What's up, everyone? We are back in Connecticut, and it has been about a week since the Clearwater Marathon. If you guys haven't seen the last video, I highly suggest you do. It basically just highlights the race day from Clearwater and kind of what I experienced throughout the race. So definitely give it a check. It is a dope video. I highly enjoyed it, the way it was put together. So as promised at the end of that video, I did say that I was going to be recapping the race. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. We're just going to be going more in depth about the race day. So hope you guys enjoy, and let's get to it. All right, so just to give you guys some overview, I landed in Tampa, Florida on January 26th at around 6:47 p.m. with my girlfriend. Right after that, we went straight to the Airbnb where I met my mother, my brother, and my stepfather. My brother was also partaking in the race, but he was doing the half marathon portion. So after catching up with them and relaxing in for a little bit, we went straight to the grocery store and I got some food. With that, I got a good amount of groceries for the carb up leading into the race. I basically planned to carb up Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, which is a similar protocol that I followed in my first marathon, and it worked out well. So after that, I got back to the Airbnb, cooked up some of that food, and got into bed by 9 p.m. Had a good night's rest that day. They say that's usually the most important rest day is 2 days before the marathon, because the night before you kind of have trouble sleeping. Got some good sleep in, woke up around 7 a.m., went to the gym and just worked on some mobility drills, some running drills, nothing too strenuous. I didn't do any lifting, and then got back to the Airbnb and got ready for a 2-mile shakeout run with my brother and my girlfriend. As far as the 2-mile shakeout run went, we ran at about a 9 per minute mile pace, which was nice and easy for me, and I really enjoyed it because of those 2 miles. It was actually part of the marathon course, so it really gave me a feel of what 2 miles of the race was going to feel like. Then around 10 a.m. we left to the registration, and it was about 8 minutes from the Airbnb, which was very convenient. We got there, I got my bib 1375, and basically just hung out there for about 2 hours because they had what they called a sauna village there, where they brought portable saunas and portable cold plunges. And so we did that for a while, and then I also bought some swag, some gear. As you can see, I got the hat here and some shirts, shorts, and other things like that. Then after the sauna village, we went back to the Airbnb where pretty much I just relaxed, ate, and hung out with the family for the rest of the day. At around 6 p.m., my girlfriend and I ended up going into the hot tub that was at the Airbnb just to relax a little bit more, and eventually went to bed around 9 p.m. again that night. And I have to say, the sleep was pretty good. It was a lot better than my first marathon race where I only slept like 2.5 hours the night before. So I was pretty happy about that. I got up around 4:30 a.m., got my breakfast ready, which consisted of basically a cinnamon raisin bagel with banana and peanut butter with a coffee as well. And then as soon as I finished those two things, I had my full bottle of water with 1 scoop of BPN electrolytes, which I believe off the top of my head is about 500 milligrams of sodium. After having my breakfast, I laid out my race day kit onto the kitchen table, got it all ready, and attached my bib to my singlet. Now for the gear that I used, I had the Bandit hat, which is one of my favorite running hats because it has the holes at the top of the head where it allows a lot of air to come through, so it keeps you cool. I also like wearing hats during my runs because I noticed that if I tend to sweat a lot, it picks up a lot of the sweat so it doesn't get in my eyes and doesn't really affect my run at all. On top of my hat, also through the majority of the run, I had my Roka sunglasses just in case it got really sunny, which it didn't really end up being that sunny throughout the race, but did put them on towards the end when the sun did come out. For a top, I had my Bandit singlet. It was a new one that I got when I was in New York a couple weeks back, and I really like their singlets. I wore a black one for my first marathon, and it worked out really well. And then for bottoms, I had the Gen 2 half tights from Bandit as well. Now, the reason I went with the Bandit half tights is because I like how many pockets that they have. For this race day, I ended up holding a total of 4 Go gels. I had 2 in my left side and then 2 in my right side. They have specific areas where you can put actually gels, so it's very convenient and they don't move around at all. And then also I had my cell phone in my left pocket, which I gotta say, a lot of times with cell phone pockets, I find that cell phones don't really stay still, but with the half tights, it really stays up against your body and doesn't move around at all. And then also along with that, I had my electrolyte tablets in a Ziploc bag that I put in another pocket. And besides the pockets, I really just like the way the Bandit half tights feel. It's just very light, and I just feel like I'm not even wearing anything when I'm running almost when I wear those. It just kind of feels like you're wearing boxers. Now, as far as shoes, I had the Nike Alpha Fly 3s, which I made a first first impression video on, and I had only used them at that point for a 5-mile run that I did on the treadmill. So going into marathon day, that would have been my first day using them on the actual roadway. And I have to say, all in all, I was really happy with them again. I definitely recommend them over the Vaporflies. Vaporflies are still good shoes, just my personal experience, I did really feel more comfortable in the Alphafly 3s. And then for my watch to help me keep track of my paces throughout the race was my Garmin Forerunner 965, which is really the only watch that I have quite a bit of experience with. For that, I had an Apple iWatch, and I decided to make the transition once I became more serious about running. Now, getting to the race, our Airbnb was really close to the start line, so we got to the parking lot area at around 6:10 a.m. As soon as I got out of the car, I put on my Nike Alphaflies and intended to get a pretty decent warm-up in, but as I made my way to the starting area, I was messaging back and forth with my coach. We pretty much had the goal of going out at a 6:45 per minute mile pace, and was really aiming for a sub 2:55 marathon and PRing from the first one that I ever did, which was in 2 hours and 56 minutes and 19 seconds. While those were some of the goals in mind for this race day, we also took into account the weather conditions and how it wasn't really ideal for a marathon. It was 68 degrees at the start of the marathon. It was expected to drop anywhere between 64 to 62 degrees with some pretty decent winds. So like I said, it's not ideal for a marathon, but we were really going to try and just stick to the plan of going out at a 6:45 per minute mile pace, taking it pretty conservatively, and then trying to just give it my all towards the end. After messaging with my coach for a little bit, I ended up having to use the bathroom again, so I had to get in line for the porta potties. Unfortunately, there was not enough porta potties for the amount of people that were standing in line, so I ended up getting into one of the porta potties at around 6:55 a.m. and exited it at around 6:58 a.m. So I ended up missing a decent warm-up and missing the national anthem that they did before the race. I got to the start line right away after that and was able to hear Jesse Itzler, who is the owner of All Day Running, the company that hosted the event, gave a speech and did the 10-second countdown, and then the race started at 7 a.m. sharp, and I wasn't able to start the race with my brother, which is what I intended to do. So going into the first mile, I ended up letting the adrenaline and just the race environment get the best of me and ran at about a 6:15 per minute mile pace, which is not what we intended to do. Like I said, my coach and I planned at a 6:45 per minute mile pace, and within that first mile, I hit the first of 3 steep bridges throughout the race. I knew about these 3 bridges from the reviews I read, and I knew they were going to be probably the most difficult part of the course. So after going over the first bridge, it gets relatively flat, and then the second bridge comes at miles 2 to 4. Now that one just felt like a longer bridge, but I don't believe it was as steep, but it definitely still made an impact on my pace, or at least it felt like it. And then I used the downhill portion to catch back up on my correct pacing. So after mile 4, it again got flat for the next, I think, 5 miles or so. And then at mile 9 to 10 was the third bridge, which was the steepest of all 3. And that's where I noticed a drastic change in my pace. It slowed down on the uphill, but again, during the first loop, I was able to catch back up on the downhill portion. And then from miles 10 to 13, again, it was flat, and you basically just doubled back to the beginning of the race. The half marathoners went one way, and then the marathoners went straight to do the double loop portion of the course. So I made my way back up to the first bridge again. I still felt relatively good, and I was actually clipping away at that point from like a 6:30 per minute mile to a 6:40 per minute mile. And then it wasn't until I hit the second bridge at about 15 and a half miles to 17 miles where I noticed where my pace went from a 6:30, 6:40 range to about a 7:10 per minute mile pace. So a drastic change in difference. I think just my legs started to feel the fatigue from the steep hills of the bridges. And then as I made my way to mile 20, that's when I really started to notice the wind was picking up, and obviously having wind or having to run against the wind is not really the best when it comes to running. It quite slows you down as well. So I pushed through those next 3 miles or so and hit third bridge between miles 22 and 23. And at that point, I really slowed down to a 7:29 per minute mile pace, and I tried to ride the decline on that bridge again, but it just wasn't happening. I wasn't going as fast. And I think just the combination of being fatigued with the wind and the incline all played a part in that. From miles 23 to 26, again, like I said, it was the flat portion of the race, but from there on in, I was basically running against the wind the entire time and really felt it hitting me, and just I could feel the effects of it slowing me down. And when I kept looking at my watch, I noticed I was in a like 7:15 to 7:20 per minute mile pace, and obviously, like again, my legs are even more fatigued at that point too. Once at mile 26, towards the end of the race, I was asking directions from a volunteer, and she accidentally gave me the wrong directions. I think she thought that I was coming through on my first loop from the marathon and not going to finish. Luckily, another volunteer heard me conversating with the lady and pointed me in the right direction for the finish. Once I got towards the finish, I could start hearing the energy of the crowd, everyone yelling, and it really hyped me up to give my last full ditch out effort for the quarter of a mile left in the race. So I finished off strong and crossed the finish line at 2 hours, 58 minutes, and 50 seconds. Now, while it wasn't a PR, I was still pretty happy getting under sub 3 given the conditions of the race and the fatigue that set in my legs. And then I was most happy about that I was able to give my family a hug and just see all their faces after the race, that including having my girlfriend there. And it was just a great experience and something that I will never forget, having them there at the finish line. After talking with my family at the race, I did have intentions of hitting the sauna village again, but it was just too windy, so we ended up going back to the Airbnb instead. I took a shower, got ready to go out to eat, had some tacos post-race, and spent some more time with my family the entire day, and rested up and tried really not to walk so much because just I was sore right after the race was done. So that pretty much concludes my experience during the Clearwater Marathon. Still, you know, obviously, like I said, it wasn't what I wanted as far as time, but happy with the experience. The coolest thing I got to experience actually was the day after. I celebrated Medal Monday with my grandfather, who was an avid runner back in his days, and he actually inspires me to continue running. And he gave me one of his old trophies from the 1990s that he had, and gave me a tank top that he ran with in, I think it was 2003. So it was nice to be able to share that with him, and I could tell just from his expressions that he was very proud of me and he was kind of living through me, and it was cool. So yeah, that's really about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this race recap, and it kind of gave you an overview of how the Clearwater Marathon was, and if it's a race that you guys want to do in the future, you have some insight in it now. So that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this series. I do have another race coming up that I will be sharing with you in the next video, so until then, keep an eye out, and like I said, hope you enjoyed, and if you did, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm out of here. Peace.